Hi, I'm Kevin,
And I'm Amanda.
and we are serving up
All that jam.
All That Jam, Quick Hit. Dave Halchak on Giant Walking Robots.
What's up, Dave? How you doing?
What's up? How you guys doing?
Doing well. Thanks for joining us. I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I think, Kevin, that was a reference to Giant Walking Robots covering it, or was that just random?
No. Yes, covering it. It's
My
fantastic.
bandmates voted against it, so it's out of rotation right now. So you might want to mention it, and then I could get in their ears again about it.
There you go. No, it's fantastic. It's a great lyric. I mean, the whole history of it, and you guys, I think, do it justice instead of the straight blues shuffle reading that you usually get.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Well, why don't we take that and let's talk about some giant walking robots. Let's start there. Why don't you share maybe the origin of the band and your description of the sound?
Sure. The origin of the band was I had wanted to start a project that mixed, live electronic, what a lot of people call livetronica, which is kind of an amalgamation of jam bands mixed with electronica music, and mix it in with reggae. That was kind of the initial idea. It took a little bit to kind of get there. I started the band with another drummer, and we're still friends. There's no like hard feelings or anything. He's a great dude. But it just didn't align quite like we needed it to. And then we had Matt Schooley, who was our drummer, and he jumped into the mix and immediately clicked, and like we've been progressing, we've been writing a lot, we've really developed a sound. And what that sound is, like a lot of people get, I don't want to say confused, but a lot of people will either call us a jam band or they'll call us a reggae band. And like, I guess jam band is a little more on the money, but at the same time, really what it is it's dub rock livetronica is what it is, because we mix a lot.
Jam band's a huge umbrella. Huge.
It is, but it doesn't really, because you could have String Cheese, you could have Fish, you could have Sound Tribe, you could have Disco Biscuits, you could have, it's like, well, they're all jam bands. So jam band no longer, it used to Grateful Dead, Fish, Widespread Panic, okay, jam band. But with so many, offshoots of the jam band world these days, I don't think you can just say jam band. So we at one point made a joke that we were reggae adjacent, because we do have a lot of reggae influences, but then we'll have like a straight dance song, which is got tracks and, no reggae at all, so we kind of bounce around quite a bit, but that's what we like doing, and that's how we like writing, and that's how we feel that we've developed a sound that we really enjoy, and keeps people on their toes.
Yeah, for sure. We use the term jam band adjacent quite a bit, I feel like, because it is hard to know, especially these days, where to place things. Not that everything needs to have a category, but the reality is that humans like to categorize.
In the world of social media, it has to have a category.
Gotta have a hashtag or 10, to figure it out. Usually more is good. Okay, so thinking about that then, if we were to go in a time machine all the way back to like 2019, 2020-ish, Pray for Them, if I'm thinking about it correctly, was much more on the reggae sound, but then the stuff that you've been putting out lately, you can see that progression, I guess I'd call it. Or would you call it a progression, or just simply, you're kind of in that space for the moment? Maybe you'd go back at times to the reggae thing.
I would say it's a little bit of both. It's definitely a progression because, for instance, we just released a single called Sick, and that's definitely reggae heavy. But if you listen to it, you'll hear our drummer throw like some non-reggae beats in there, especially towards the end of the tune. He goes to a 4 on the floor kind of vibe. And I would say that kind of Pray for Them was a song that I wrote that was a little more me sitting down with an acoustic and like, okay, here's the structure of the song, let's play it. Sick was more of a, okay, here's this idea I have. Can we try this bass line? Can we try this? Us, not just me saying, hey, play this. The whole band as a group working together to write that one. Whereas Pray for Them was a little bit more written with my acoustic. Hey, here's the structure. Let's play it, Although both songs, if you listen to Pray for Them, we do give a little, we wanted to show in the studio what we're going to do live with it without it being a 10-minute track. So what we did was at the end of Pray for Them, we go and give a little preview of like, okay, this is what we're going to do live, but here it's just going to be like 4 measures and then we're out. Because we wanted to keep the studio track shorter per se. And that was really only the second single that we ever released. So, it was developing as a band, and we do feel like we've landed in an area of our sound at this point, which is, after a pandemic, after a drummer change, so all good things. But we do feel more like, okay, what is Giant Walking Robots? It sounds like Giant Walking Robots. Whereas when we released Pray for Them, I think it was a little less developed and a little more of a, hey, I wrote this song, let's play it, Whereas now it's much more collaboration.
I want to get into songwriting in a second, but while you were talking, it reminded me of, I think this is less than a year ago, I had seen you all, and one of the big things I noticed is you all had a synth, or maybe not everybody, but to me that felt like a really awesome way to not switch up the live sound, but I feel like it gave you all a lot of options for what you could do. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how you all are using that and maybe how it kind of comes down to the jam part of, of what you do? Oh, and Kevin just posted a question too.
I see that too. Yeah. So yes, so we used to have a keyboardist. We no longer have a keyboardist. When our keyboardist left the band, we were like, oh, we got to get a new keyboardist. And sometimes I do still feel like that because there are holes that could be filled. However, Wilson, who plays lead guitar, does some vocals, and is like a synth maestro. You've seen us live, so you've seen his setup. He was the first guy that kind of stepped up. We were doing a camera jams. I don't know if you guys are familiar with camera jams, but we had one on the books, and our keyboardist wasn't going to be able to be present. So Wilson was like, I'm bringing this spaceship. So he brought it, and it was kind of on the fly, and we were kind of like, oh, that's really cool. Maybe we don't need a keyboardist. So then I added a synth, and then George, our bass player, added a synth. And Matt Schooley, who is our drummer, uses the SPD, which is not a synth, but it's a drum pad where he can trigger samples, loops, all sorts of different things that allow us to be a 4-piece. But one of like, I take it as a compliment. One of the most common things I hear from a lot of times it's sound engineers or just people that are at the show paying attention. They'll be like, man, half the time I can't even tell who's making what sound. And like, to me, that's a really cool compliment because there is a lot of sound coming from 4 people. And sometimes when I listen back to the recordings, I even have to like think about what I was doing at that particular moment to figure out who was making those sounds. So I think the synths really allow us to go from, okay, say we're playing Pray for Them, since you mentioned that song, pretty straightforward reggae tune. But then all of a sudden Wilson's doing a lot of, synthy stuff, maybe creating some sounds. And then I go to a synth, and then George, the bass player, is playing a synth bass, and then all of a sudden there's no guitar. It's all synths. It's all electronic sounds. I personally am a big Pink Floyd fan. I always have been since I've been a kid. I think a lot of that comes from growing up listening to them. And I always go back to like the statement that Roger Waters made about like, someone says, oh, well, you guys rely on technology too much and you guys use all these synthesizers. And he's like, all right, well, how about this? There's 17,000 people in the crowd. Stage is set. All the instruments are set up. Why don't you go out there and play the show? See how it goes. So it's, I don't get offended if people say, oh, they use too many of this, too many of that. To me, it's all sounds and different dynamics that you could bring into the fold. And, to Kevin's question, to my bandmates, shout out to my bandmates. They were the ones that kind of pushed me into getting my synth on stage because it had just been collecting dust in my studio. And so I would give a shout out since Kevin was asking. We have Matt Schooley on drums. We have Wilson on lead guitar. Oh, sorry. Matt Schooley on drums and vocals. We have Wilson on lead guitar, synths, vocals. We have George Demopoulos on bass and synth. And then I'm Dave Halchak. I play guitar, lead vocals, and synths. Since we kind of wanted to cover that. But to my bandmates' credits, all three of them, I do kind of appreciate that they've pushed me because I'm not, to be frank, I'm not a keyboard player. I'm a singer-songwriter guy that plays guitar, and they pushed me to step outside of my comfort zone, and I'm appreciative of it because we all kind of work together. They'll help me, oh, let me take a look at your synth. I'm going to try out some new sounds, and then we'll work together to find like, oh, that's a really cool sound. Let's try to use that in a jam tonight. So again, it's coming back to the collaborative nature of the band. And I really do feel like the band, Giant Walking Robots, is the four of us. Like, if you didn't have one of us, it would be weird. I'm not saying we can't play a show without all four of us. We could, but it would be weird and it would be different,
Yeah. Well, you all have a really kind of what, from the perspective of a fan, feels like a very kind of effortless and honestly really positive dynamic with each other on stage. There's a lot of communication. There's a lot of like interaction between the four of you. And I've actually never asked you this, but I've wondered how you all handle just the process of a jam or improvisation on stage. Do you have talkback mics? Is it cues? Do you just kind of let it go? Like, what do y'all do?
So this is something we've been like kind of putting a Post-it note on. We don't have cues. We don't have talkback mics. And the reason we don't have talkback mics is because we're not all using in-ear monitors. So if we had a talkback mic, it would just come through the monitors, and then that would be weird. Because then the crowd would hear it.
Go to G.
I don't know.
Exactly. Exactly.
Sometimes people would be thinking like it's a new version of art,
No, that's cool. I mean, I would love to have a talkback mic, but we need to get, and I use in-ear monitors, but I'm the only one in the band that uses in-ear monitors. So we would need to get everyone on ears. I think it would be very helpful, but it's just a step we haven't taken yet. So that being said, and to your question, hand signals, shouting at each other. We're trying to avoid shouting at each other on stage. Not in a night like, hey, go to B minor. That doesn't always have the best look. We'd like to minimize like, yo, go to the change. We'd like to minimize that as much as possible. So it's something that we've been practicing, communicating without communicating in a sense, like hand signals, head nods. You get to a point where you can look at each other, and I'm sure many jam bands would talk about this, or improvisationally based bands or projects would say that you get to a point where you know what the other person is thinking, and it's a telepathic type thing. You know, it sounds a little more new agey than it may be. I think you just know what the question is in the other person's head, and you know by the look that he gives you what the answer is. It sounds silly, but I think just being on stage and being in a rehearsal space so much together allows for that. But I would like to have talkback mics because it's much easier.
But,
who was telling us, Amanda, that they would tap the top of their head sometimes?
Wasn't that yesterday?
I think it was yesterday.
Colton from The Settlement?
Yeah, maybe it was Colton from a band called The Settlement out of West Virginia.
Cool.
He was saying that he'll do like tap the top of his head to mean go back to the top.
That would be,
marching band. That was awesome too. I didn't even mention. I was like, oh my God, that brings me back. Like one more time, kind of like it was very interesting. And to be honest, we asked that question a lot. And so the answers, while they are varied, and a lot of it does have to do with equipment, various things. But that thing that you're mentioning about just being able to kind of understand without even speaking where someone might be going. We hear that a lot in different ways. So it's not new agey or anything. It's like legit, I think.
I think you broke up a little bit in there, but I think I'm following what you said there. There was like a few words where I lost, but I think I follow you.
Yeah.
Well, okay, let me ask you more about improvisation. When you're up there, how do you make sure that you keep your voice while contributing to the whole?
Oh man, that's a tricky one, I guess. Keeping my voice in terms of
like you're authentic, who you are as a guitar player,
okay. Sure. Just by trying to get in there and offer something to the overall sound in the sense of, okay, Wilson's on this cool riff, George has got this cool synth line going. What can I do? And just trying to come up with the coolest idea, really. We try to keep our improv sections of songs as open-ended as possible. We definitely fall into patterns, but I personally am always trying to come up with either something I worked on while I was practicing or something that's in my head at the moment that I think can add to the overall sound. And like, that's what it is like, okay, what are the three other guys doing right now? What can I add to make it work? Or even, what can I add that's going to add to the overall sound or the overall texture or the overall idea that they're putting out, I think it's really a case-by-case scenario because sometimes it might be something I worked on in rehearsal. And I'm like, I want to put that in the jam for this song, at this show. And that happens sometimes, but I try to go into the improvs with just an open mind of like, okay, less is more, number one. And number two, if I am going to add something, make sure it's something cool. And it sounds silly or simple, but, that's the idea is like, keep it interesting for the crowd. Otherwise you're just up there, wanking,
I mean, it sounds simple, but I don't think it is that simple. I think it probably takes years to get to a place where you can make that call on the fly. You're processing as you're playing. To me, that's actually very kind of nuanced and complex in its own way, even if it appears to us like there's no thought involved. It just happens like magic.
Yeah.
No, it's not magic, but sometimes it really feels that way,
Yeah, I mean, and it feels like that to us sometimes too. I think that's the another big compliment to ourselves, to pat ourselves on the back is if we do get into a song or we get into an improv section and you get to a point where it's just a totally different vibe, it's a vehicle that's moving, that's like, here's the song, and we're like over here, like, okay, that's cool. How did we get here? Doesn't matter. Now we figure out, okay, how do we get back? But I think that's kind of the goal, is like getting to that space where the jam, so to say, or the improv is just kind of moving without anyone really thinking about what's happening. Obviously we're thinking, but for me, it's always worked best when you're just kind of allowing it to flow through you and out through your fingers,
The less is more. How often do we hear that, Amanda?
Yeah, I tell you, you put a compilation together, and it's amazing because that is shared in a lot of different ways, but the essence of it is pretty much the same thing, every time. I want to make sure we talk about Wake Up and Live, because I was going to say something like Giant Walking Robots, but wait, there's more. But before we do that, you all have some dates coming up. If you want to share a little bit, Dave, about Giant Walking Robots.
In March, we'll be teaming up with Space Bacon for 3 shows. Yeah. We did too. We're really excited. We played with them once. Their first ever Denver show was our second ever show. And it was sold out. It was a blast. So we're going to team up with them for a run. It's going to be Boulder. It's going to be Denver. And it's going to be Fort Collins, actually. So yeah, that'll be really exciting because we really like those dudes and we're stoked to play some shows with them. We think our sounds align. So those will be really fun.
If you are enjoying All That Jam, please like and subscribe to our social media channels at All That Jam Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or visit our website, allthatjampod.com. Make sure to sign up for our email list and tune in every week for new episodes.
Also, look for full interviews on our YouTube channel. And remember, stay beautiful, but don't stay underground too long.